Hello and welcome to Straight Talk, Supply Chain Insights, the podcast for your supply chain leader who is on the go and wants to be in the know. And now, your host, Lora Cecere.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights. My name is Lora Cecere. I'm the founder of Supply Chain Insights, and today it gives me great pleasure to introduce John Monarch to the show. John is the founder and CEO of ShipChain, and he's going to talk about logistics and blockchain. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
So tell the group a little bit about yourself that I didn't already say. What are some factoids about John Monarch that are interesting?
Well, I went to Clemson University, go Tigers. I have a background in physics and computer science, but got into the logistics industry. My dad actually had owned a trucking company for a while, and it was just always interesting to me. And I ended up founding a 3PL, specifically fulfillment. And one of the big issues that we had was just visibility on import, especially for multimodal shipments. And a lot of ShipChain came about because we were trying to answer the question of how do we, really get better visibility into just general shipping.
Wow, and the 3PL market, I think, has been really stagnant, not a lot of innovation, and most people can't see inbound freight. It's like, why can we not move faster in this industry? What's your perspective?
I agree. I mean, it always felt like to me that software designed for the shipping industry was built by engineers for engineers to use. And it all kind of feels like DOS terminals out of like 1992. It's not intuitive. It doesn't really provide, just a quick user experience that you or your customers even might, want to actually use. It might have some of the information there, but many times you're having to log into 20 different systems or multiple different spreadsheets. And it just really has been not an effective way of using technology to our advantage.
Well, why do you think it's engineers by engineers versus business leaders by business leaders? What's the gap there? What's your insight?
I think that business leaders tell the engineering teams what they want, don't really articulate it very well. They tell them, they want all this data, they want all of this stuff, but it's come at it from a perspective of more of the data side than anything, less of the actual usability side. And, now we see these ERP systems and these TMSs that take weeks to learn that, oftentimes you have to fly in a trainer and you're spending tens of thousands of dollars on these training seminars that really shouldn't have to happen. I mean, it should be software that's usable, like logging into social media or, just something that you could teach a grandparent to use in 10 minutes or less to be able to find their freight shipment. And with younger workforces coming into supply chain, we know that that's an expectation. And it's something that I think that a lot more technology in supply chain companies are going to have to focus on.
We are currently doing some work on a talent study, and we're finding out that baby boomers are more satisfied than millennials and Gen X. For that very reason is our systems are just really hard to use and not really intuitive. And in fact, a lot of people don't use their systems. So John, let's talk a little bit about you and the excitement around ShipChain and your work with blockchain. Tell the group your story.
Well, blockchain technology came around, of course, initially due to Bitcoin. And that was something that, we really started exploring additional use cases. I say we as in like technologists, a few years after that. And the supply chain use case started coming up more and more. And everything from certifying documentation to being able to prove transactions to having all of that in one place. And we've seen some private use cases come around from it. We've seen some test cases from some of the ocean carriers, for instance. But now I think that especially as things advance, you're starting to see more of this actual transition into wanting public ledgers basically out there. So there's different types of blockchain. And now we're coming all full circle to where companies are recognizing the use cases of these public networks to secure transactions with each other and prove them. But at the same time, users should never actually have to see blockchain unless they really want to. It's such a complicated technology that you really should never have to see it unless there's, say, a legal dispute, for instance, that needs to be proven one way or the other.
All right, John, why blockchain? Why now? What's the use case?
Blockchain is great when you have a lot of different parties involved in a network or transaction, like a supply chain. that don't necessarily trust each other. And that's really what we deal with every day. I mean, forwarders and brokers don't trust each other. Trucking companies don't trust their brokers. The shippers don't trust anyone. So we need to have a layer underneath everything that can show that there is, you can trust in the system without trusting in the participants. And that's where blockchain is very useful.
I love that quote. Trust in the system without trust in the participants. We've talked about collaboration for many years, but it's hard to collaborate if you don't trust, right?
Exactly. And it's hard to collaborate when no one really speaks to each other. I mean, we like to say that everyone's connected and everyone's talking, but not to each other. They've all got, a million different systems that don't necessarily link up. EDI is, still stuck kind of 60 years ago and needs some modernization. And that's all things that we're trying to work on.
Well, I laugh and say that, what we've got with EDI is a lot like old-fashioned mail, right? I get something in my mailbox. It's usually 2 or 3 days old, and I can't respond. It requires a stamp. It's expensive. I got to go to the mailbox. It's inconvenient. EDI is a lot like that. It's batch. It's awkward. It's not bidirectional, but a lot of times people get very enamored with blockchain, but can't really make it successful. So tell me what you've done that has helped you to use blockchain, because I think it's a very promising technology to your advantage. What problems are you solving?
So there's a few that we're really focused on, and one is certification of documentation. That's a very easy step. You can effectively have a digital notary service, but beyond that, we're able to actually create digital original documents. And in maritime, for instance, that's such a big deal because we spend hundreds of dollars per shipment sometimes on shipping around using courier services, physical documents for the bill of lading, and that gets pretty old and pretty expensive, and is just generally not the best way of doing things. And along with that, we're actually participants in a broader protocol discussion with several supply chain companies, Ernst & Young, Microsoft, along with like BP, British Petroleum, as part of Baseline Protocol, it's called. And one of the initiatives we're working on is helping Baseline, as it's called, EDI. So what that would allow us to do is to have everyone communicating with blockchain and being able to have EDI formatted and discussed effectively, quote unquote, through blockchain itself. So that way there's not really a need for these value add networks that charge an arm and a leg to send EDI transactions, especially for smaller businesses. But along with that, it would create and enable multi-party EDI, which is something in the entire history I think everyone has wanted but never really figured out a way to do. And it's just like you said, it makes it bidirectional.
Multi-party EDI. Now, I'm really liking the sound of that. Have you implemented it, and what is the use case if you have?
There are test cases being implemented, and it's a collaborative open source effort through Baseline. There's us and several other companies that are working on this, and the goal of that really is to be able to communicate all of these different transactions at one time, rather than having to go through the VAN network and one company sends to another, then to another, then to another. We'd rather just disseminate all that information at the same time, and then that way the retailer or the distribution center can all send it to the carriers and be able to have that kind of digital interaction similar to APIs would, but while still using the existing EDI systems and EDI language that they're used to.
So John, I'm going to give you a magic wand. The year's 2030, we're rolling the calendar forward. We recognize that the existing EDI providers were expensive and clumsy, and they got consolidated, and that the supply chain operating networks were invested by venture capitalists and they didn't really innovate very much. It's 2030, you've got a magic wand. What does network interoperability look like?
I think having that single public layer underneath everything, that open environment, really makes a lot of, it solves a lot of those problems. I mean, that way there's one integration to do rather than, I need to come up with, my client uses this arm of SAP or this, part of Dynamics or NetSuite or whatever, or it's a custom plugin that they have and I don't. It all speaks one language ideally, and it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but I think that's the steps that are being done with, one, baselining, but two, we're starting to see a lot of interest in blockchain from groups like the GS1. And we don't want to create the same standard list standard mess that we ran into previously with EDI. We want to have that singular layer underneath that we can all talk to very easily. And that's ideally where I would see us 10 years from now.
Well, I'd love to see us ISO 8000 compliant. I think the GS1 standards are a bit of a mess too. And, we got a lot of standards that were kind of balled up and not really driving interoperability. Many times people are really stuck on integration, and interoperability is so key to this, to be able to move bidirectionally and to orchestrate. So what would be your recommendation for a listener out there that wants to fix this mess? Because right now it is a mess.
Participate in all of these different groups. Baseline is just one. Get involved with groups like, the GS1 and make sure that it's pushing towards better data quality. Research that ISO 8000. We've open sourced quite a bit of our work because we feel that it's necessary for, just general public utility. We've made it free. So with ShipChain, you can check out what we're doing and, work on that, or even take it and make it your own in many ways. And that's something that we're really excited to be able to have people do. We want them to take our ideas and implement them in their own ways, as long as it's still within that kind of standards window. And we really would invite anyone who's interested in this type of stuff to participate in that.
Well, I appreciate that, John. Now, let's talk about the organizational dynamics. We don't really have a good definition of what is a node on blockchain, and how do people really get ready to operate nodes, and what does this organizational dynamic look like? What would be your recommendation organizationally for the listener?
Blockchain governance is a bit complicated, and talking about running nodes, with the way we've set ours up, so we're actually, we're very similar, and we're based on Ethereum, and it's a side chain of Ethereum, basically, to get a little more complicated in this, but we focused on Supplychain specifically. So we would invite people to check out what we've built and run test nodes. There's no cost to it. It's completely free to set up a test. It's no cost to us either way, since we've made it such a public network. We don't even control our own system anymore, basically. We've made it just like the internet. It's a decentralized and kind of open environment that anyone can build on top of. And it's really the same, just experiment with it. Any sort of these networks, if someone tells you that you have to spend $250,000 to experiment with it, that's definitely going to be wrong. It's all of these are designed with the idea that you should implement them, you should test them out, you should be able to just mess around with it if you have some developers on your team to get that experience with it and see what it actually can do for your company.
I encourage the digital transformation team to investigate this, to look at how they can attach documents, have digital documents, be able to couple digital documents with transactions, design side chains. What would you do differently or add to that?
I'd agree. I think that digital transformation teams should make sure that they explore public blockchains over private. And the reasoning for that is so that we all can speak the same language once and for all, rather than I need to be able to communicate with your blockchain, which is behind your firewall and your walled garden type of stuff. We don't want that anymore. And it just makes us all less efficient. So public networks like in Ethereum, or like what we've built with the sidechain of Ethereum, are designed with the idea that they need to bring all of these different parties together and speak the same language. So we're always happy to help. Even if companies never work with us, we want to show them what can be done with it.
And John, tell us a little bit about the genesis of your company. How old is it? How many clients are you working with? What have you learned?
So we were founded in 2017. We have several clients. We're mostly large enterprise and some government. I'm not allowed to list many of them. We did do some public pilots that we can talk about, but it's really spread out between, we've had a lot of interest from North America, of course, because that's where we're headquartered, but Europe and Asia as well. We've learned that, I would say we've learned primarily that we can't go in expecting everyone to replace all their existing systems. We have to work with everything that they already have, because, you're talking about companies that have spent millions to tens of millions of dollars on ERP implementations, and they aren't just going to go throw that out. So it's all about building something that can play well with that, but also live up to the promises of the technology itself.
Well, John, we opened when you were talking about you can track a pizza much better than you can track an inbound shipment. Tell the group a little bit about that and how you see the future.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the question we'd always worked to solve. You know, when I order a delivery pizza, I can see dots on a map exactly where the driver is. And, you know, I get $2 million of consigned freight and I have no idea. And I had to deal with that personally where we were talking about close to $500,000 worth of inventory just disappeared basically for 3 weeks. And the forwarder I was working with had no idea. The carrier basically told the forwarder, this is one container, just wait. And it shows up 3 weeks later with a bill for detention that we had no choice but to pay because it had been sitting outside of someone's visibility for so long. And it's just these issues pop up frequently and we're all paying for them. It's not as if companies or ports enjoy charging detention fees. It's a waste of their time too. So the more we can do to provide better visibility and better tracking and better documentation for everything, the more we can get rid of those charges and that wasted labor on, you know, just even tracking those types of charges.
Isn't it so true? You know, my personal mobile phone, the apps there are just so much more user-friendly than all of the supply chain systems that people have invested 1.7% of revenue on. So John, all the best to you, and I'm going to invite you to the Network of Networks work where we're doing some experimentation with this. And I embrace you driving a difference. So let me know how I can help.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on. And like I said, we just, you know, want everyone to embrace that kind of public and open source ideology with this because it will end up better in the long run for the entire community.
Awesome. Until next time, this is Lora Cecere, Straight Talk with Supply Chain Insights, interviewing John Monarch today from ShipChain. He's the CEO and founder and doing some really great work on blockchain. Key message: public, open, and get with it. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much.